This morning, a Florida community is desperately awaiting answers as rescue workers look for survivors in the rubble of the building collapse in Surfside, Florida.
As of now, city officials say one person is confirmed dead, 11 people have been hospitalized, and 99 people are still unaccounted for. President Biden declared a state of emergency, and FEMA is now working with the Red Cross to help those who no longer have a safe place to live. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now. Sam, describe the scene there this morning.
Ellison, Joe, good morning. Good to be with you. Officials from the beginning have said it's not what you're seeing above ground, but what's going on below ground that would be so telling. But let's talk about what we're seeing above ground right now. You can see the crews are spraying off all the dust that's coming up from this rubble. That's 3 stories high, full of rubble. Just an indication of some of the conditions right now that fire and rescue crews are up against. They are valiantly going around this building when we know it's not structurally sound, trying to find any of the 99 unaccounted for people right now. Now, 99 needs some context, guys. It does not mean that there are actually 99 people missing, but that the actual, I guess, projection or ceiling of the folks based on the number of units that had fallen off, 55 units, would be registered in that apartment, would be 99 people. So the rush is on right now, urgent hours. We see some video from Miami-Dade Fire going underneath the basement with about a foot or 2 of water that they're wading through using sonar technology, trying to listen and see if they can detect any signs of life. And weather has been a concern. I will tell you, the wind is so strong right now, the tent that is above me, right above me, was almost lifted up and thrown away simply by how strong that is. There were audio scanner signals yesterday talking about debris falling from the building and telling fire crews to take shelter. So they are trying to thread a needle right now between safety and urgency as the window is closing to try to recover anyone that might be underneath that rubble. Joe and Allison?
Sam, we talk about the 99 who are unaccounted for at this point. What are you hearing from the family and friends of those who are looking for loved ones who haven't heard from someone who they know lived in the building or may have been inside the building?
As you would imagine, they are desperate because it's now been over 24 hours of this, and they have a hotline, they have a reunification center. That's not really a replacement for information about where their loved ones are, and this has been going on. They are holding their breath, hoping they'll be able to reconnect with those loved ones. But we're talking about families from all over, guys. Paraguay, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, certainly people that came from the northern part of the United States down here that relocated. And we're told that that building was largely full, according to the Surfside mayor, when this collapse happened. These family members are at wit's end right now, hoping for more information. They've actually expanded the number of hotlines to call to get it. But until we have an update on what's actually going on with the search and rescue operations, those hotlines aren't very helpful. Guys?
Yes, Sam, obviously the priority, it's been emphasized by officials there that the priority right now is just trying to save as many lives as possible, trying to get answers for those families and identify and locate those 99 unaccounted for. But do we have any sense of when we might get more information, maybe some answers from officials in some sort of public capacity at a press conference or anything like that?
Yes and no. So there's an 8 a.m. press conference that's scheduled, and that probably will have Mayor Danielle Levine-Cava from Miami-Dade County and certainly Miami-Dade Fire and Rescue. But the caveat here, Ellison, is the fact that they've had several updates just in the last 12 hours. There was one at 8 o'clock last night, 4 or 5 in the afternoon prior to that. Once we found out there were 99 unaccounted for and 102 accounted for last night, there have been no material changes. So maybe we find out that all of this overnight work has led to a miracle or a rescue. That would be amazing news, but past history indicates that it's probably just going to be, we're continuing to go through right now and try as hard as we can to find those loved ones. Guys?
All right, Sam Brock reporting from Surfside, Florida. Sam, thanks so much. Appreciate your reporting.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
It's sentencing day for Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd. To help us preview the sentencing, we're joined by NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster in Minneapolis and NBC's legal analyst Danny Savala. Shaq, let's start with you on this. Tell us kind of big picture, what do we expect to hear today?
Good morning there. Well, you know, it could be a day of that, or I should start by saying it'll be a day that's shorter than what we expected during those trial days. You should not expect a day long of hearings. It should be about an hour and a half long. Who we hear from specifically, well, that remains to be seen. We know that we'll hear from the prosecution and the prosecution's team as they announce how long they expect or how they make their request for how long they believe Derek Chauvin should be in prison. We know we'll hear from the defense team. We can expect for Derek Chauvin to have the opportunity to speak. Whether or not he takes that opportunity, well, that is up to him. And we also know we'll hear the judge explain his sentence and then announce his sentence. Now, the day will start with some victim impact statements. We know that the Floyd family is in town. We don't know who will give that specific victim impact statement. That still remains to be seen. But again, it should be a shorter hearing when you compare it to what we saw during the actual trial, also.
All right. And Danny, obviously, the big thing people are looking at is numbers. There are kind of a range of numbers that could be given in terms of a sentence. Experts have predicted that Chauvin could get potentially maybe 20 to 25 years. I've heard that people have said this judge, based on just past remarks and kind of his past style, they think he will rule above 12 and a half years. But walk us through all of that. Remind our viewers what crimes Chauvin was convicted of, and then tell us what you're expecting in terms of sentencing and knowing what we know about this particular judge.
Chauvin was convicted of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and then manslaughter. But for sentencing purposes, he's really only going to be sentenced on that lead highest charge, the second-degree murder. The sentencing guidelines say that all other the sentences should run concurrently. So we're really only talking about that lead highest charge. The statutory maximum, 40 years. He's not likely to get that. Instead, the recommended sentencing guidelines suggest a presumptive sentence of 150 months, but a sentencing range of 128 to 180 months. If the judge goes outside that, he can, but it's considered a departure in sentencing parlance. And that means that he has to show a lot more work, and his sentence could be a little more subject to attack on appeal. So the safe sentence for the judge is within that range, even though both sides are asking for departures. In other words, the state is asking for 360 months, and the defense is asking for 0.0 month.
Shaq, you have covered this from the very beginning. You were there every day during this trial. What sense do you get of this particular judge, how he might rule, kind of based on just what you've seen in the courtroom in the past and also previous cases? I know that George Floyd's family, if I'm not mistaken, they've said that any sort of middle ground on sentencing is not justice. What are you expecting to see from the judge? And have you heard anything from George Floyd's family?
That's right. His family making very clear they want to see the maximum sentence possible. The maximum, of course, is 40 years, but legal analysts say that's not going to happen. You can take that off the table. They're hearing 30 years, and that's the number that they say they will be at least satisfied with, although they want to see Derek Chauvin in prison as long as possible. But in terms of this judge, this is a judge that has a very good reputation here in Minneapolis. He was actually chosen by the chief judge here to handle this case and handle the operations of this case. We saw a lot of him. This was a televised trial, so we saw how he works. We saw how he likes to explain his decision. So I think we can expect to hear a pretty thorough explanation of his sentence from the bench there. We also know that since 2008, he has given a sentence for this crime before, for a second-degree murder before, and the range has been from 12 and a half years all the way up to 40. So it's really hard to say from previous cases and from previous sentences what he will do this time around, but we know that he has a reputation for being fair, and we should expect that today.
Danny, one other layer here, if you will, is that Derek Chauvin is also facing federal charges for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Is that something that will impact the defense's strategy as they go into this hearing?
Generally speaking, you deal with the case before you. The goal today is to get Chauvin the lowest possible sentence for the defense. Will they get 0.0 months at a probation only? Probably not. But in their view, the prosecution's asking for double the presumptive sentence. So they're probably trying to counter what they perceive as an unreasonable request with their own unreasonable request. The judge is not likely to fully grant either side's request. More than likely, this judge, at least if I were the judge, I'd play it safe, stay within the guideline range. If you really want to launch him, sentence him to the high end, 180 months, and then no one can really question what you did, at least legally.
Okay, and Shaq, last question here. Take us sort of big picture past what is going to happen today. And let's talk about those 3 other officers who were on the scene when George Floyd was murdered. All of them face charges and have pled not guilty. What is next for them? Do we know?
Well, Ellison, you probably heard me say during the trial that we had another trial coming up. And for the 3 other officers, former officers, that was initially planned for August, but their trial has since been moved to next March. Part of the reason why the judge explained he moved this trial is because they're also facing those federal civil rights violations, those charges from the federal grand jury that Danny just mentioned. So we expect to see them in court dealing with that in July. So just a month away from now. We'll still see when that plays out and how that trial plays out. We don't have a specific timeline for that.
All right, Shaquille Brewster, Danny Vallis, thank you both so much for your time today.
We want to head back to Surfside, Florida. The town is waking up to many unanswered questions this morning.
The Oceanside community is home to a large Latin American and also Jewish population. The Associated Press says that foreign ministries from at least 4 countries have reported citizens who are missing after the collapse.
Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett joins us now. And Mayor, we want to thank you for taking a few moments to speak with us. I know you've been busy in your community. We've been thinking about you during this challenging time. We know rescue crews have been working around the clock, efforts that we can see above the ground, many things we can't see. But where do things stand with that right now? Are you hearing about anything they've discovered or any progress at all?
No, I left the site last night around 12:30, and I'm back at my home ready to head out right now. I'm about 4 blocks away. I can hear the helicopters over the site. I'm going to go walk the site right now and get the latest update on what's happening there. As of last night, the search and rescue teams were out there in force. We did have some setbacks with respect to the weather, and I see on your screen you're seeing maybe that's the fire that we also had. So it's been very challenging, but our only priority right now is to focus all our efforts on search and rescue that rubble. We've got hundreds of family members, and as you said, I've had calls from around the world with family and loved ones that are presumably here at that building, and that's all we're doing today. We're just going to be all over this, and I have some better news for you a little later in the morning.
We certainly are hoping kind of at every update that there will be better news. But Mr. Mayor, at this point, I know that it has been emphasized that the priority is trying to find anyone who is unaccounted for, trying to save anyone who may be trapped under all of that rubble. Our colleague Carrie Sanders was reporting yesterday that some rescuers had said they heard what sounded like tapping under some of the rubble. Is this still a search and rescue mission, or is there concern at this point as the time ticks on that we could be switching to potentially a recovery mission?
Mentally, emotionally, and in all other aspects, this is a search and rescue operation at this point, and it will continue to be so. We have no intention of stopping that. We owe it to the families, and we are going to pull everybody out of that rubble that we possibly can alive.
And we know it's early, and you've been asking the same questions many of us have. How does a building just suddenly fall down out of nowhere? What do you think needs to happen? What's the process you want to see moving forward as they try to determine the cause of the collapse and try and give, I guess, the community and everyone out there a realistic timetable? How long is it going to take to get answers?
Well, listen, I think that is on everybody's mind. And, buildings do not fall down in America. This is a first world country. That's a third world phenomenon. There's something very wrong here, and we are going to get to the bottom of it. But today is not that day. Today is a day to pull people out of that rubble and to do everything we can to reunite families. So, we're not focused on that at all. Focus is strictly on saving lives, and that's what I'm headed over to do right now.
Mr. Mayor, really quickly before we let you go, what is your message this morning to the family, the friends of those 99 people who are unaccounted for? What do you want them to know today?
Well, the first thing I want them to know is that we don't have an accurate count right now of the number of people that may or may not have been in that building. But I want them to know that every single resource we have right down from the White House. National resources, President Biden has committed, Governor DeSantis, we have our senators, have Debbie Watson-Schultz, we have our county government, the mayor, Cava. And as you can see in the pictures there, we are not limited by resources. We are only limited by the luck that we need to find these people. So we need to just stay focused on that effort, and that's what we plan today, tomorrow, and the next day.
All right, Mayor Burkhead, thank you so much for taking a few moments to speak with us. We're thinking of you and everyone in your community as the day progresses. Moving on, a new analysis from the Associated Press shows nearly all COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. are now among people who were not vaccinated. It's more evidence that the vaccines are working. And as the AP puts it, an indication that deaths per day, now down to under 300, could be practically zero if everyone eligible got the vaccine. Here's a reminder of how far the death rate has fallen this year. Back in mid-January, 1 month into vaccinations, the U.S. reached a peak of more than 3,400 COVID deaths daily. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez is here to break down these figures more. So, Isa, what else does this analysis tell us about how effective the vaccines are?
Good morning, Joe. This analysis looks at CDC data from May. And what it found is that breakthrough cases, so these are infections among people who have already been fully vaccinated, accounted for just 0.1% of COVID-19 hospitalizations that month. Now, when you look at COVID-19 related deaths in May, we're talking about 18,000 COVID-19 deaths, and about 150 of them were these breakthrough infections. So that translates to about 0.8%. Now, again, this is an analysis from the Associated Press based on CDC data. The CDC itself has said that they're not estimating what percentage of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths at the moment are breakthrough cases, citing limitations in this data. Joe?
Now, Isa, leaders are pushing, of course, to try and get more people to get the shot, especially as the Delta variant spreads. President Biden traveled to North Carolina to talk specifically about vaccines. What more can you tell us about that visit?
Yeah, Joe, President Biden urged North Carolinians to go out and get vaccinated. This is a state that has been lagging behind his goal of getting 70% of Americans vaccinated by the 4th of July. Take a listen.
The science is clear. The best way to protect yourself against the virus and its variants is to be fully vaccinated. It works. It's free. It's safe. It's easy. It's convenient.
As of now, about 42% of the eligible population in North Carolina, so those 12 and older, have been fully vaccinated. About 45% have received at least one dose. Joe?
And Isa, dozens of states, including North Carolina there, are offering lottery prizes for people who get the vaccine. Now, Ohio, the state that started that movement, is ending its program. So do leaders there think the lotteries paid off?
Joe, initially in Ohio, let's take that as an example since it was the first state, Governor DeWine said that there was a boost in vaccinations after the announcement. So that initial week in May, they saw a 43% increase in shots. However, since then, the vaccination rate has gone down week by week, and the state has not been able to reach the 50% threshold. Right now, about 44% of the eligible population there has been vaccinated. Now, when we look at other states that have followed suit, offering lotto prizes such as Louisiana, New York, Maryland, for example, they've had similar issues. You know, right after the announcements, they see a boost, but they're unable to pin down that momentum in the weeks following. Joe?
All right. Isa Gutierrez. Isa, thanks so much. Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns joins us. Bill, good morning. What do you have?
Hey, Allison and Joe, it's all about the Northwest. And I mean, we have actually two potentially deadly weather activities that are going on this weekend. We have the extreme heat and we have flash flooding that's ongoing now and will continue. But I mean, this heat wave, no one alive in the Pacific Northwest has been through anything like this in this region of the country. So we have 22 million people at risk. Now, just, you run out of superlatives to say this is just a heat wave that is unprecedented for this region of the country in duration and how hot it's going to get. So today we begin to approach the record highs. We're not going to quite get there yet. This is kind of the beginning, the warm-up act. But then by the time we get to Saturday, we start breaking what we call daily record highs, the hottest temperature experienced on that day. So we should beat that easily in Seattle. Notice Portland should up to about 104 degrees. Sunday and Monday are the peaks of the heat wave. That's when we're not only going to beat the daily highs, but we could beat monthly June highs and possibly all-time record highs for a few locations. And you see on Sunday, look at that, 108 in Portland, 105 in Eugene. So the all-time heat wave record in Seattle was back in 2009 at 103. Right now, they are forecasting 102 on Sunday and 103 on Monday. So we have 2 shots at the all-time record. And this would be the first time in history that Seattle will have back-to-back 100-degree days. And for Portland, the all-time record high is 107. It looks like Saturday and Monday will be in the hundreds, but lower than that. If we're going to break the all-time record in Portland, it would be on Sunday with 108. That's crazy to have 3 days in a row that warm. And typically it's 77 degrees in Portland. And then the other weather story, which is still developing at this hour, we have numerous locations in Missouri under flash flood warnings from St. Joseph down to Columbia. Kansas City and St. Louis are also in the flash flood watch, but 20 million people are going to be impacted by this over the next couple of days. And watch out from Peoria to Chicago and in Michigan too. We could see upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain as we go throughout the weekend. So there's the forecast. I almost feel guilty, guys, being in the Northeast and having just absolutely gorgeous, picture-perfect summertime weather. We're the exception. The rest of the country is going through extremes. It's
mind-blowing looking at numbers. You said what, normally in Portland, 77 is the high, and we're looking at 108? Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much.
The important numbers is who. Yeah, all right. The important numbers actually is only 30% of people in Seattle have AC, 70% in Portland. So we'll see how that plays out.
All right, we hope everybody stays safe there. Thank you so much, Bill. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Coming up, a bipartisan compromise has been reached on infrastructure legislation.
Yeah, but that is only the beginning. We'll dig deeper and talk about what's now on the table. Stay with us for more Morning News Now.
A rare sight in Washington these days became a reality yesterday when President Biden appeared outside the White House with a bipartisan group of senators making this announcement about their infrastructure talks.
Really good meeting. To answer your direct question, we have a deal.
In addition to managing his top legislative priority, today President Biden will meet with the President and High Commissioner of Afghanistan at the White House. The high-stakes discussion could shape the future of Afghanistan once U.S. troops withdraw by the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And away from Washington, Vice President Kamala Harris will make her first trip to the U.S.-Mexico border today, 93 days after President Biden asked her to take charge of migration policy south of the border. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Mebeley joins us now to break down a whirlwind end to the week in Washington. So, Mike, let's start with where I started, with the infrastructure. What does this compromise look like, and what does the White House plan, or what does the White House plan to do to get this to President Biden's desk?
Well, Joe, depending how you do the math, and this is Washington, so there are a few ways to add the numbers up, but this amounts to about $1.2 trillion in new spending on infrastructure, a little less than half of that on your traditional transportation infrastructure, especially passenger rail, as the president highlighted yesterday, something close to his heart. Now, the pay-fors are, to be honest, a little flimsy. One of the line items that they put forward yesterday was the macroeconomic impact of infrastructure spending, which is a fancy Washington way of saying it'll pay for itself. But obviously, the Republicans are already raising concerns about those issues and whether or not this is even going to be passing without an even bigger infrastructure package. That's especially where Democrats are concerned, who want to see the president go bigger. He addressed those Democratic concerns head on in his remarks yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Physical infrastructure, but we also need the human infrastructure as well. They're a part of my overall plan. What we agreed on today is what we could agree on, the physical infrastructure. There was no agreement on the rest. We're going to have to do that through the budget process. And we need a fair tax system to pay for it all. I'm not going to rest until both get to my desk.
So what the president outlined yesterday in terms of the strategy is on exactly what Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill have said, which is he's not going to sign this bipartisan compromise if it passes unless he also can sign into law that bigger Democrat go-it-alone infrastructure package. It's going to be a real tough lift for Democrats to get this done, but the president was insistent that he can.
All right, switching gears here, Mike, President Biden is getting ready to welcome Afghan leaders to the White House today. What is the purpose of today's meeting?
Well, the big picture focus, of course, is what happens when the U.S. follows through on the announcement the president made earlier this year to withdraw all remaining U.S. forces after 20 years of a presence in Afghanistan. Specifically, the president will be talking to the Afghan leaders about some of the commitments that he secured from our NATO allies, as well as from Russian President Vladimir Putin, as it relates to securing parts of the Afghan capital specifically. And then there's another issue that's close to a lot of folks' hearts here in Washington, which is what happens to those interpreters, Afghan civilians who helped U.S. service members. The president saying yesterday that they were working on a plan to have those individuals move to third-party countries, not necessarily all to the U.S. He said, we're not going to leave anybody behind who aided our U.S. service members.
And, Mike, the third thing on our list here, Vice President Harris will head to the southern border after she was tapped in March to tackle the root causes of immigration. Just how much pressure has she faced to visit the border? I'm reminded of her interview not so long ago with our own Lester Holt. And what does she plan to do today?
Yeah, the vice president already on her way. Air Force Two took off just about an hour ago. She'll be heading to El Paso, where she is going to be visiting one of those detention centers near the border. When asked why El Paso was chosen specifically, a senior administration official said that was the birthplace of the Trump administration's family separation policy. So it gives you an insight into how she's going to be casting her remarks there. We can't help but notice that this trip was announced rather abruptly after former President Trump announced he would be going to the border, but the White House maintaining that this was an effort by the vice president, who has focused on those diplomatic efforts with Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, to see some of the benefits already coming to play as she meets with some of the outside groups who are also assisting those migrants near the border.
All right, lots to cover this morning. Mike, thanks for joining us on this Friday. We appreciate it.
You got it.
All right, now let's take a look at what is making news around the world.
NBC's Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, good morning.
Joe, Ellison, good morning. Israel is imposing a nationwide indoor mask mandate as COVID cases surge, fueled by that highly infectious Delta variant. Israel has one of the world's highest vaccination rates, but case numbers have quadrupled in the last week after an outbreak in schools. Authorities now urging parents, get your 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated. The Belarusian dissident dragged off that Ryanair flight last month has been moved to house arrest, according to his family. Belarusia's authoritarian regime forced the civilian airliner to make an emergency landing so it could arrest Roman Protasevich. The U.S. and Western nations have imposed sanctions in response. And finally, an Australian scientist has figured out a way to talk to frogs. The 70-year-old Michael Mahoney is so good at imitating frog noises, he's able to hold conversations of sorts in Australia's wetlands. He calls, the frogs call back. But guys, imagine how disappointed you'd be if you're an Australian frog, you're ribbiting, you think you found a mate, and then there's this Australian professor there.
Who seems lovely. I'm sure he's very nice. So
seems like a very nice guy.
Great story. Thank you, Ralph.
All right. And just last month, do you remember that Senate Republicans blocked a House-passed legislation that would have established a bipartisan commission to investigate the January 6th insurrection, kind of like the 9/11 Commission? Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is stepping in, announcing yesterday that she intends to form a House Select Committee to investigate what happened on January 6th.
This morning, with great solemnity and sadness, I'm announcing that the House will be establishing a select committee on the January 6th insurrection.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now to hopefully explain everything to us. Leanne, when something like this sort of happens where you had something that was on the table, didn't make it through, it's kind of confusing to understand how this will work moving forward. So break that down for us. How will this commission work? Are members going to actually have any sort of power, say, to compel a witness to testify or even issue subpoenas?
Good morning, Ellison. So the other was a commission. This is a committee, which means hardly anything to most people. But the difference is that a select committee is created with members of Congress currently sitting. It's because the Democrats are in power. There's going to be a majority of Democrats, most likely, on this committee. And Speaker Pelosi is going to be able to choose who sits on the Democratic portion of the committee. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy will be able to choose who sits on the Republican portion of this select committee. Now, as you mentioned, the reason this was formed is because the Republicans blocked a January 6th commission that was to be made up of outside people, equally split among Republicans and Democrats. Why they would want a committee instead? Well, they don't. But Speaker Pelosi is determined to move forward, and she says that she's going to, and she's going to form this committee. Let's listen to more of how she explained it yesterday.
Again, we yielded on every point. We yielded on the makeup of the committee. We yielded on the timing of the committee. We yielded on the process of the committee. I just would not yield on the scope. They wanted to make it about Black Lives Matter. That wasn't what happened on January 6th. So I was not going to yield on the scope.
So now she is going to be able to control what the scope is, focused on January 6th and the extremist groups leading up to it, and even the former president. Another difference is the commission was supposed to be wrapped up by the end of the year. Speaker Pelosi said that this is going to drag on as long as it takes them to do their work. So this could very well go into 2022, right into the midterm election cycle, Ellison.
Wow. Okay. So a committee, not a commission. Details, but on Capitol Hill, details are everything. And we're so glad we have people like you to pay attention to those details for us. Another component of this, obviously, Republicans. Have you heard anything from Republican leadership and what they're thinking about this committee?
They've been absolutely silent so far. They haven't said anything. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is going to hold a press conference this morning, which he often does during the week. And we will definitely ask him about this. But Republicans did not want a commission where they were going to have more control. They were fearful of a commission implicating their members. Kevin McCarthy was fearful, reportedly, that he was going to be compelled to testify before that commission. Well, now it's in the committee's control. Democrats are going to control. So I assume that he is not going to be very thrilled about this. And we'll see what members he appoints to it, and if any, Ellison.
All right, Leanne Caldwell, we will check back in with you. I am sure of it. Thank you so very much for that. We appreciate the time.
It's official. California Governor Gavin Newsom will face a recall election. The Secretary of State there confirms recall organizers gathered more than 1.7 million signatures, enough to proceed. So what do voters think? Here's NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce.
Good morning, Ellison and Joe. Well, it's official. Governor Gavin Newsom becoming only the second governor in California state history to face a recall election. But it'll likely be a few months before we get any sense as to when this recall election will take place. First, the state's Department of Finance has to analyze how much all of this is going to cost. Previous estimates have put this at about $215 million. They're going to figure out whether this will take place as its own special election or whether they will conduct this as part of a regularly scheduled election. Now, once it's actually on the ballot, voters will have to answer two questions: whether they think Governor Newsom should be recalled and who they think his replacement should be. Now, we've been in a suburban district outside of Los Angeles that can best be described politically as purple. There's a good mix of Republican and Democrat ideologies here. And here's what we found.
He seems to be the only one anywhere that has done what he's done and made the rules that he's made and abused the power like he has. And he doesn't deserve to be where he is.
So you feel like he should go?
Oh, yeah, he should go.
I don't think he'll be recalled anyways. And people voted him in, and that's how it works. And if they don't like him, then when he comes up for re-election, they can vote against him.
Voters here in Santa Clarita have been telling me it's been impossible to avoid the messaging around this recall effort. They say that they've seen the signs and demonstrations everywhere. Now, up until this point, Governor Newsom has been describing this as a partisan Republican recall. But it's important to note that both Democrats and independents have also signed on to these recall petitions as well. Ellison, Joe?
Coming up, it's your weekly dose of good to know.
And still haven't gotten your vaccine yet? Well, Walgreens has some green for you if you stop in for the shot. We'll explain in just a minute.
The CDC has extended its eviction moratorium for the last time. Tenants have until the end of July to secure housing before landlords can begin evictions. But renters say federal relief has yet to arrive, leaving millions at risk of losing their homes. NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford has more.
Temporary relief for Socorro Sosa, who is packing up everything she owns after receiving an eviction notice.
Con todo esto para la calle.
All of this will go into the street. Today, the CDC extended its federal moratorium on housing evictions that was set to expire June 30th. That means tenants like Sosa, who are among the more than 6 million households behind on rent, now have one more month before their landlords can evict them.
Mucho nervio, mucha tensión.
A lot of nerves, a lot of tension.
Es una cosa que uno siempre está ansioso.
You're always anxious.
Sí.
Black and Latino residents are most at risk, facing rates of potential eviction almost 4 times higher than white renters. Housing advocates say the extension is essential.
It's keeping tens of millions of people who would otherwise lose their homes during a global pandemic stably housed.
Congress has allocated more than $46 billion to assist both renters and landlords. This moratorium extension, expected to be the last, buys more time to get those funds distributed. Joe, Ellison?
And it is time now for our weekly consumer roundup. This morning, another incentive to get your vaccine, plus a new dating app feature that might make it easier to decide whether or not to swipe right. Here's NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicki Nguyen with Good to Know.
Good morning. Some big news from Canada Goose, the maker of that popular and pricey warm coat with the fur hood and the patch. The clothing company announced plans to stop purchasing fur by the end of the year and will stop making its products with fur by the end of 2022. It's a step the company is taking to become more environmentally conscious after years of using coyote fur in their jackets. No need to press all those buttons to finagle a screenshot. Twitter is now allowing iPhone users to share tweets directly to their Instagram stories. You can skip the screenshots and share tweets right from the Twitter app. You still waiting to get your COVID vaccine? Walgreens is offering $25 to spend in-store to everyone who gets their shot at a Walgreens pharmacy. In most states, the Walgreens cash rewards will be available immediately following that shot for those who have a My Walgreens account. Those without an account can instead get a $25 store gift card. Happy Pride Month. Zoom is adding new options for users to share their pronouns. The video conferencing company says users can choose when or if their pronouns are shown during a meeting. Tinder is hoping a new feature will be another reason to make you swipe right. The dating app will now give users the ability to express themselves through 15-second videos on their profiles. Now, you won't have to wait for that first date to find out what your crush really sounds like. Good luck out there. For News Now, I'm Vicki Nguyen, and that's Good to Know.
It is.
Oh, sorry.
You go ahead. You take it. You're eager. You're ready. It's going to be better if you do it. Tell them what's next, Joe.
Proctor's too hard to read, apparently. Time for our CNBC Money Minute. Biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Christina Parzinelli.
I don't know if it'll be necessarily better with Joe, Ellison, but yes, both of you, right? So let's talk about Microsoft unveiling Windows 11, the first major update to its flagship operating software in 6 years. It will be available later this year on new computers and other devices, and as a free update for those with Windows 10. It includes a number of cosmetic upgrades, such as a new start button, an overhauled taskbar and sound, and under-the-hood features designed to boost speed and efficiency. This is interesting. In a challenge to Apple, though, Microsoft says it won't force app developers to pay fees to the company for using its App Store. Amazon and Google are facing a probe by British regulators over concerns they haven't done enough to combat fake reviews. Misleading reviews are a huge problem for e-commerce websites, with Amazon being a prime target for brands looking to hype their products with favorable write-ups. Last month, Amazon called on social media firms to help it weed out dishonest reviews. Snapchat inks a deal with Universal Music Group to bring major artists to the social media platform. This means users can now search for songs from various artists such as Justin Bieber, the Bee Gees, Lorde, Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, and the list continues, and include them in their content. Whether that can be a snap you send to a friend or submit to Spotlight, which is Snapchat's answer to TikTok. Snap says so far more than 500 million videos have been created and viewed 31 billion times since the launch of its Sounds feature last October. 31 billion times. It's incredible.
Is crazy.
Wow.
But that sounds like a handy thing. I'm particularly interested, though, in how what shapes up with the UK and those fake reviews. That is fascinating.
I think it's fascinating just because so many people don't actually go to pay attention. Yeah. Is that person writing, 20 reviews? And then you look at, they're so similar. There's so many fake ones out there.
Yeah, you do have to be cautious of those.
Mm-hmm. All right, Christina, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
And coming up, puppies adopted during the pandemic are now being returned to shelters as the country starts to reopen.
We'll take a look at whether the pet boom has gone bust. That's next. When millions of Americans were forced to return to work from home, many decided they needed an extra companion. The result, a pandemic puppy boom with more than 12 million U.S. households getting a new dog or other pet.
But as offices reopen, some of those animals are now ending up back in shelters and rescues. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson explains what is behind the returns.
Corey had been at Animal Haven in New York City little over a month when he was adopted early on in the pandemic.
People were at home. They're like, I'm at home. I'm sitting here working on my computer. I should have a dog at my feet right now.
But now, Corey is back where he started.
Sadly, the family brought him back to us, returned. So it is an example of a family adopting an animal during COVID and then returning.
As the country reopens and people return to work, dog surrenders are up nearly 80% compared to this time last year. That's according to the most recent report from PetPoint, which tracks this data. Overall surrenders are still well below pre-pandemic levels, but some on the ground say it sure doesn't feel like it.
On average, we would probably see about, between 30 and 50 returns of those puppies. We're well into the hundreds at this point.
Erin Jones is the founder of Moms and Mutts Colorado Rescue.
I'm in contact with a lot of the other rescues in the area, and we're all experiencing the same thing. Slow adoptions and a lot of returns, and it's been really challenging.
Challenging for everyone involved, including the dog.
A lot of them don't understand why their owner is leaving them at the front door, why their owner leaves and they don't go with them.
The reasons for the returns vary.
Some of them said that they went back to work and they didn't have time. Some of them said that the dog was not well behaved.
A lot of it is about the fact that people's income wasn't what it was before, and they went and they either adopted or purchased an animal, and now they have to make choices. And the first choice often in a home, unfortunately, for big costs can be a pet.
Lacey says dog owners struggling to afford their pet should look into low-cost vet care, food pantries, and volunteer dog walkers. And if you decide returning your dog is the best option,
go to a shelter or go to a rescue group before dumping their animal or just leaving their animal, anywhere.
As for Corey, the search for his forever family continues.
He just owns the place. So he's really great. And if you're an active person in or out of the city and you want to add an addition and a sweet dog to your home, he'd be perfect.
A teenager from Long Island, New York, is swimming into the Tokyo Paralympics and into the history books.
NBC News correspondent Natalie Morales spoke to her for Nightly News' Kids Edition.
Some call them the dynamic duo.
Thank you. I just feel such a connection with him, and he's such a mush.
The adorable golden labradoodle has become a lifeline for 17-year-old Anastasia Pagonis, who recently lost her eyesight from a rare disease called autoimmune retinopathy, where the immune system attacks proteins in the retina. The high school graduate relies on Radar's help to get around.
Radar, find the curve? He's changed my life. I didn't have any freedom or independence before him, and now that I have him, I feel like a totally different person.
While Anastasia's life has changed, her determination certainly hasn't. An avid swimmer before losing her eyesight, Anastasia dove back in. She has spent months training for the Paralympic trials. And this past weekend, she not only earned a spot on the U.S. Paralympic swim team heading to Tokyo, but she also shattered a world record.
Anastasia Pagonis, 4:59.28. That is a new American record.
We caught up with Anastasia after her big win.
I was like, wait, no way. And I just could not stop smiling. Like, I just literally was smiling the entire time. The most important thing is being a team supporter. I think that supporting my teammates when they win gold is going to be more important than me winning gold. And knowing that I got through the whole experience is a win in itself.
It hasn't been easy.
I felt like if I was blind and I was this teenage girl that like I had nothing to live for anymore, if I wasn't going to be a swimmer and if I was like disabled and blind. And I'm so happy that I'm not like stuck in that place anymore.
The New York teen thanks Radar for that. He's not only a fantastic pup trained by the Guide Dog Foundation, but a furry friend well known by the New York Islanders. Radar was the hockey team's first puppy with a purpose before meeting Anastasia, a helping hero to so many.
I imagine he's a really good cuddler, too, and good therapy.
He thinks that he's a lap dog. I'm like, Radar, you are almost 90 pounds, buddy.
90 pounds of love and friendship, bringing about a new sense of confidence.
What are your hopes then at the Paralympics?
My hopes at the Paralympics is just to show people that I'm blind and that I recently lost my vision, that you can do anything and you don't have to sit in your house and be the stereotype of blindness, and you can be an elite athlete. And I think just showing people, obviously I want to do it for myself because it's what I love to do and it brings me so much happiness, but just proving people wrong.
A golden girl and pup making golden dreams come true.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.